All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, boys and girls. How are you? This is Alejandro Castillo broadcasting here from Mexico City. So, we have today a very, very special guest, an incredible photographer, an artist. I call him an artist. I think his job is great. Um, I know he has a lot of fans here in Mexico, especially because the post of him that I share with all of you. So it's a great honor to have today as a guest, Mr. Jim Wolf. Hello, Jim. How are you? How's everything over there in California?
I'm great. We're interesting times right now, but we're trying to get through it, and it's challenging with everything going on here. But we're trying our best, and hopefully we'll see volleyball sooner versus later.
Yeah, we all hope so because this is the thing we love more volleyball. As you told, these difficult times right now. I've heard that in California you are in a curfew right now, so well, it's very delicate. So hope everything pass very soon.
Yeah, they're slowly reopening the beaches. I'm not sure what's going to happen with the indoor gymnasiums, how soon they'll be opening. That might be a little longer because it's a little harder to social distance on indoor volleyball than it is on beach volleyball. So I'm more optimistic about the earlier return to beach volleyball than I am indoor volleyball at this point.
Yeah, because I also read that one and a month and a half ago, the authorities retired all the nets from the beaches, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's the LA beaches are the last beaches that open, and unfortunately, that's where 98% of your beach volleyball players practice and train. So some of the Orange County beaches and Ventura beaches have already opened. So they're slowly coming around, and you'll start seeing more and more activity happening on the beaches. Um, and it's a little easier with two man because you can a little more easily social distance in the two man game than you can in a six-man indoor game.
Yes, well, yeah, I can imagine, but hope we can return very soon to volleyball, the
Yeah,
sport we most love. But well, you are not only involved in beach and volleyball. You have also a big passion for motorsports, right? Tell us something about that.
yeah. I've always been interested in motorcycle racing. I've had motorcycles my whole life and have done various track days with my different motorcycles, and I've always been a big fan of the sport. And I've been fortunate to have some connections with Yamaha Motorsports, and their director of communications um, introduced me to Valentino Rossi, the most famous international motorcycle racer throughout the world, during one of their luncheon breaks. And, you know, Valentino was just finishing his lunch, and and the gentleman I know at Yamaha said, Valentino, could we bother you for a moment to take it? Jim was interested in getting a photo with you. And he was just, my all-time idol, and still is to this day. And Valentino's very gracious guy. He goes, sure, no problem, no problem. So he stood up, and Bob took a photo of the two of us. And to this day, I tell Bob, who made that connection and took the photo, I said, I owe you my life, for that introduction and that photo opportunity, because, I'm on the other side of the camera. So I'm usually taking photos of people with celebrities and famous motorsports athletes and volleyball athletes and everybody else. And it's rare that I ever ask for a photo with someone. In fact, if you're a credentialed photographer, it's you, they don't like that. They almost make it a mandate that you never ask to take a photo with a racer or a volleyball player or anything of that nature, and no selfies are allowed or anything of anything else. It's so we have to be very cautious not to do that in the first place. But that's the one and only really photo I got of a person that meant a tremendous amount to me, and was I still have that as my Facebook profile photo and it's been that since I opened up my Facebook account, and I'm not sure I'll ever change it. Yeah.
Hey,
So
and how? No, tell us, please.
no, that was it. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, and how was your transition from more sports to discover the world of volleyball and beach volleyball?
Yeah, well, I've played volleyball my whole life. So I played, we didn't have a high school team. I played, in gym class basically in high school, and we had an intramural team that I did well on. And then I played at the University of Wisconsin, but it's only a club team for men. So that was fun. I enjoyed that a lot. And, the year I was playing, we hosted the U.S. men's national team that was right around their 1976 Olympic performance. So all of the beach volleyball stars that I knew so well, to see them in person and to see the caliber of their play, it was mind-boggling. And it was really fun to, our team hosted their visit to Madison, and it was fun to do that and see that level of caliber of play. And that really got me much more excited about volleyball. And the day I graduated from college, I hated growing up in Wisconsin. I can't stand winter. I can't stand the cold weather. The day I graduated, I drove out to LA and interviewed for jobs in LA and San Diego, knowing that I wanted to live on the West Coast. When I was growing up as a child, we would vacation a lot during, spring break down in Florida. And I knew I didn't want to live in Florida, even though it's warm weather. It just wasn't for me. And I really fell in love with California. My college roommates and I took a trip between our junior and senior year, and we hit all the California beaches from San Diego all the way up the coastline. And I just fell in love with the state and knew I wanted to live here. And the day I graduated from college, I started interviewing in LA and San Diego, took a position in San Diego, and immediately started playing beach volleyball. And that was a new experience for me, going from indoors to beach. It's so much of a different game. Everything's kind of in slow motion. And when I was, interesting background story, when I was interviewing for jobs in LA, I was staying in a little hotel right in Santa Monica, right on the beach. And literally one of the first beach volleyball matches I've ever played was against Wilt Chamberlain. And that was, Wilt when in his playing days. And another older gentleman and I played, he and another guy, and we narrowly lost to them. But being my first volleyball game and the fact that I was playing against someone that was, 7'1", I accepted that loss graciously. And it was, kind of a highlight with only shortly being in LA for like 2 days to be that, immersed into volleyball that quickly and playing someone of that caliber and that notoriety. It was kind of enjoyable and fun to have that experience. And then I kept playing beach volleyball for a number of years following that. And then I moved up to San Diego a short while after living in San Diego and played in Newport Beach for probably 15 years on the beach. And I could walk to the beach from where I lived in Newport. So it was great. It was fun times. And I eventually moved inland into the suburbs and would still take my motorcycle to the beach every Saturday. And, on a motorcycle, you don't have to worry about finding a parking place because, parking in Newport in the summertime is challenging. So I take my motorcycle, park it, almost anywhere, and, play volleyball, beach volleyball all day, and then ride home at the end of the day. And those were fun times. I enjoyed it.
Which year are we talking about? Mid 70s, early
Yeah,
80s?
yeah. I was playing. Most of my beach was in the late 70s and all through the 80s, and probably into the early 90s. I was playing beach. Played a couple of tournaments, some beach tournaments down in Mexico. Those were a blast. It was such a fun time. Those kind of impromptu tournaments that were, down in Mexico, and there was just a lot of tequila flowing and some great Mexican food and just a fun time. And we'd go down there in carloads. Players from mostly San Diego, some LA people would come down for the tournament, but it was good times. It was a lot of fun.
So, well, that was the times of Randy Stoklos, Sinjin, Karch. Ron Hagen, maybe, probably, or
Yeah, I was
Ben
actually,
Selznick.
I would go to all of the Cuervo tournaments, in Southern California, and was fortunate to be at the Cuervo tournament in Laguna Beach at one time when uh, Karch and St. John were playing. And I think they were, I'm not sure who they were playing in the finals, but there was one guy that was heckling Randy Stokely nonstop. And I've talked to Randy about this, recently about that experience. But at one point, the heckling was getting so bad, and at the Laguna tournament, you were literally sitting right on the court. There was no grandstands or anything. It was old school volleyball. You bring a beach chair or a towel, and you gather around the court, and that was it. And players were jumping into the crowds for shank passes and what have you. And it was almost to be expected that a player was going to land on you at some point of the match because you were that tightly grouped into the court. So because all the fans were so close, Randy obviously could not help but hearing this guy that was heckling him on a nonstop basis. And he said to St. John at one point, he goes, if that guy keeps, heckling me, he goes, I'm going to go after him. And St. John goes, whatever you want to do. And like on the next point, the guy, said something, Randy, and he leaps over about 4 people and grabs the guy by the neck and literally picks him off the sand by the neck. And basically the guy shut up from that point on. But Randy's famous quote after the match was, they said, well, what are your comments on that heckler? And he goes, I never touched the guy. And in the front page of the paper the next morning had a picture of Randy with his hand around the guy's throat. So it's like, well, okay, you can deny ever, strangling the guy, Randy, but the paper caught a picture of it, and it wasn't my photo. I didn't take it, but I joke with Randy about that to this day, and what a funny experience that was, and just fun times, and the same thing with Tim Hovland.
Tim
He
Hovland was
he
a great character, right?
oh, he would talk trash to the fans constantly all through the match. If someone was heckling him, he would just make it a point of just belittling that person to the point where they wouldn't say another word. And in that same Laguna Beach tournament, at the time, it was when the Hare Krishnas were really popular in Southern California, and they had a Hare Krishna temple or facility, whatever they called it, right there in downtown Laguna Beach. And they all came down there with their tambourines and thumb cymbals and were right on the boardwalk there, right next to the court, chanting away and everything else. And Hovland yells at them. He goes, hey, would you mind shutting up? Because some of us are out here trying to make a living. And it was just, in classic Tim Hovland style. He was always in LA. If there was a fan heckling him up in an LA tournament, he goes, hey, go back to Hawthorne, which is a little lower income city inland from the beach areas. And, he would just categorically put any heckling fan that, well, you must live in Hawthorne because you're heckling me. So go back there and, shut up and get out of my face. But those, the times back then, we weren't in this politically correct world we're in now. And the players were really brash, Bradovich and all those guys. I mean, it was true old school volleyball that you don't see today. There's just not the personalities in today's sport. A little bit, I mean, you've got some players that have more personality than others, but it's all still politically correct. So
yeah, like Casey Patterson, maybe he's different.
Patterson. Well, and now he's with Troy Field, who's another real fun character. Troy's a really engaging guy and funny guy and everything else. So the two of them are playing together this season. So when I heard that pairing, I said, this is a sponsor's dream, because you have two extremely popular players, and blending them together, it's going to be, the entertainment value for their matches is going to be off the charts. So I'm really excited to see the two of them play together and wish them the best. And the fans, if you're ever going to a tournament and there's 5 different courts going, and Troy and Troy's playing, make sure you're seeing that match, because Casey and Troy will definitely entertain you. if nothing else. So,
Yes, I can
and they're
imagine.
great players. They're great players.
So, Jim, what's the most important difference you see between old school beach volleyball and a place where I think you play for the pleasure, you play for the joy of playing? The difference to the to current day players. I mean, is that different beach volleyball?
It's completely different. Yeah. You know, to now and back then it was every, you know, kind of in, at least in beach, everybody played, you blocked and you played at the net and you played back court. Uh, Today it's a very specialized sport where a backcourt player is rarely ever at the net blocking. Um, and you know, normally you're matching up a big player with a shorter player, so a net player with a backcourt player, versus, you know, in old school, they weren't going after those optimal matchups, you know, with a tall guy and a shorter guy. You often see two big guys, or you'd often see two smaller guys playing together. But they were just more brash. You know, it was a lot more verbal intimidation, I guess you could call it, a lot more banter back and forth across, across the net, um, and um, and players that just didn't have so much of a specialty. There was no jump serving back then. Rarely would you even see a sky serve back then. It was just more of a float serve, not even a jump float serve. They didn't, that it was a very different game. So you were basically trying to get just movement on your serve and ball placement. And you were trying to go after, either an opening in the court or whoever you thought was the weaker hitter. That was basically the name of the game. But you never saw hitting on two. That never happened in old school. So now you've got players where you've got a big guy like Phil Dahlhauser and you've got a smaller guy like Nick. So Nick, often gets all of the serves. And to remedy that, Nick's now passing the ball up to the net so Phil can hit on two. So, that's changing. And now what I really enjoy seeing in beach volleyball that's somewhat new to the game is the jump fake sets on two. So, they'll pass the ball to the net. That hitter, it looks like he's going up to hit the ball and he'll jump high in the sky and do a set, across the court. So now you've taken that blocker completely out of the equation. Never saw that in old school. So, the game is constantly evolving and it's becoming a little more specialty in terms of the positional, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I understand that, that's what you have to do to be successful and compete with the top teams is you almost have to have that positional relationship.
Okay, well, that's amazing, your analysis. Thanks a lot, Jim. Uh, about Randy Stoklos and St. Smith, what is the influence do you think they had in the evolution of beach volleyball at that time?
Well, they were so adept at the game, and they had they both had very well-rounded volleyball skills. So whatever happened on the point, each player was equally adept at making a play, and both of them could hit really well. Obviously, Randy was the bigger blocker of the two. Randy instigated the Kong block, which was he brought that part of the game into effect. And he created a blocking strategy that hadn't really been seen before on the beach. And what that created was just a much wider surface area of net coverage for blocking. Historically, blockers would go up and they'd have their arms relatively close together. So they were covering, a 2 or 3 foot hitting zone. And the hitters could generally hit around that. And you saw very little dinking. In old school, there wasn't so much, the loft shot, over the block. That didn't happen much. And I think because the blocking skills, until Randy started evolving blocking, it wasn't a need to dink the ball very much because you could more easily hit around the block in old school than you could today. But Randy, set the bar high for great vertical jumps, and if there was ever a joust at the net, 98% of the time, Randy was winning that joust because he was just, his upper body strength was just off the charts. And even with that upper body mass, he still had that incredible vertical jump, which made him a very unique package on the beach. Most of the other players, were leaner on their upper body, Hovland and Dodd and those guys, they had lean upper bodies. So they weren't carrying that much weight, in their jumps, and they could, get a lot of vertical, but they may not win a joust against Randy. So that's one thing I see. The games, the players back then were more well-rounded. Today, they do have a well-rounded background to them, but they're much more specialty in terms of their court positioning and their relationship with their partner. And serving has changed the game too. The serving, not only are they jump serving to just an amazing speed and acceleration and topspin and velocity and everything else, but now the jump float, all of those aspects of serving has really changed the game from what was old school volleyball.
All right. And which your favorite team of today beach volleyball? Dalhauser and Lucena?
I would say I expect them to win. So anytime they don't win, I'm somewhat surprised. Would I say it's my favorite team to win? Probably not, because I like more animation and I like more just kind of I just like, I think, more personality, in a player. Phil's a little robotic. Phil's got the best skill set in the world and some of the softest hands of anybody I've seen for his size to be able to hand set. It's uncanny, how good he is at that. But he's a little too robotic for me on the court. Doesn't get in a lot of verbal, trash talking or anything like that. I still like growing up with old school, and because I'm an older guy, I still like that trash talking aspect of the game. And I like the personalities, and when there'd be certain matchups in old school, you knew it was going to be just a comedy fest of trash talking with some great volleyball intermixed. Today, it's just great volleyball with hardly any trash talking. Casey Patterson and Troy has it. There's still some players, so those two guys, they're as close to old school as you can get, from the standpoint of personalities, fun to watch, trash talking across the court. They'll if they're ever in your area, make sure to watch them.
And who you think were the best trash talker in old school beach volleyball?
Well, it would have to be Hovland. He's up there. Obradovich was really good. Those two guys, stand out. Who else? Those two guys were pretty, they set the bar high. Mike Dodd, you never heard a word out of him. He didn't have an opportunity to ever speak because, Hovland was talking all the time. Randy had a little bit in him, but not much. St. John was a real gentleman. You didn't ever really hear trash talking out of St. John. Brian Lewis, he trash talked a little bit, and he was a shorter guy. So, if you don't have a lot of height to bring to the game, although Brian had an incredible vertical jump, you kind of supplement your size differential with some trash talking. And Brian could get under the skin of a lot of opponents. And it works, quite honestly. I mean, I've seen trash talking work to the fullest benefit to the athlete doing it. So there is some advantage to doing that, but you don't see it in today's world because we're too politically correct.
Yes, and especially in these times, right?
Yeah, and I think players nowadays, they're so dependent on their sponsors that I think, that's in the back of their mind that, I don't want to upset my sponsor by trash talking. So I'm going to be, really PC when I'm on the court. And unfortunately, that's the nature of today's game.
Great. Hey, Jim, we have a question from a big fan of you, Jose Gil Ramirez. He's my friend from Mexico, a volleyball photographer. He says, Jim, which do you prefer shooting on a volleyball match, technical skills or physical game? It's a great question.
Physical game, I think, yeah. I'm not real big on, the technical skills. I'm more about getting a shot that's going to elicit kind of a wow factor from people that are looking at them. There's other photographers that are out there with their light meters and everything else and trying to get, just the perfect technical shot. But I think I'm much more focused on composition, framing, and just setting up a shot that I think is going to be really interesting. And a lot of it is just knowing the sport and knowing the athlete. Having played beach volleyball for years and years, and indoor as well, I kind of have a good feel for the game, and I try to learn the players and their tendencies and their idiosyncrasies as much as I can to kind of anticipate what's going to happen on the point, so I can, be in position to capture that. And then it's one thing to be in a position to capture it, but it's another thing to kind of frame that photo to make the athlete look as best as possible. So if you ever are at a match and you're seeing me shoot, I'm often shooting with my camera on the sand, or on a beach towel in this case. And I'm doing that to get as much of an upward perspective as possible, which heightens the visual look of the players jumping. So he might be jumping 30 inches out of the sand, and by shooting at the angle I'm shooting, it makes him look like he's jumping 40 inches out of the sand. And I think it just makes for a more interesting shot. And I shoot more wide angle than I shoot tight. And I'm probably the only photographer that's almost exclusively using a 24-70 lens, versus almost every photographer on the beach that's shooting with a 7200 lens. The problem with the 7200 is to get like full view of this from the sand blasting out their feet and all the way up to their head and arms and hitting ball contact. You got to go into a portrait mode. So it's taking away some of the story around of that photo, because that longer lens is forcing you to go to a portrait mode versus the landscape mode. So it loses some of the perspective of what's happening in that photo, where the setter might be, where the other, defender might be, everything else, by going with a longer lens. So I'm really more about perspective and composition and creating, just here's the story. You can see where all the players are positioned on the court. You can see what looks to be a player jumping really high out of the sand. And those things that I think are more appealing to viewers. And the viewers, don't necessarily have the technical knowledge of, well, the focal focus might not be perfect on this, the camera settings may not have been perfect on this photo, but God, it's an intriguing photo. I'm really, I can't stop looking at it.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jim. Here's another friend from Mexico, Rogelio González. Te mando saludos, compa. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and experience.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I hope to meet you someday at a match.
A very good friend of mine, Octavio Medina, a former volleyball player in Mexico, says, "What an amazing hobby you choose. Definitely, a picture tells so much than words. Your work is just wonderful."
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's just I just do it on a side. It's just a hobby that I do. It's very hard to make a living in sports photography, and even the creme de la creme, which are the photographers for Sports Illustrated. A number of years ago, Sports Illustrated almost terminated their entire photo staff of photojournalists. They still have a few, in place. But so many of these guys that were full-time employed as sports photographers at Sports Illustrated are now independent contractors like you and I, and they just try to get jobs wherever they can in whatever sport that might be. Granted that they're in a better position to do that because of their resume, but it's challenging to earn a decent living as a sports photographer. So I own a economic and real estate consulting firm. So I basically have two full-time jobs. I work, from basically 9 in the morning until 7 at night doing my regular job, which is doing feasibility studies for large real estate developers is what I do. So if they want to build a large industrial complex or an office complex or an apartment complex, I help them with determining product and things of that nature. So that's my day job. And then on the weekends, fortunately, most sports is on weekends or evenings. So I'm able to do sports photography mostly on weekends, and then select evenings if there's an exhibition match or a college match. Most USC has kind of figured it out. For a lot of the independent freelance photographers that cover college sports, USC now has moved the start of their matches until 8 o'clock at night. So it gives people like me that normally are facing an hour and a half to a 2-hour drive to get to USC sufficient time to get up there from my end of work day and making it to the court before the match starts. Most other colleges start their games at 7 o'clock at night, which is a little challenging. I can't get up to UCLA by 7 o'clock on a weeknight, especially on a Friday night. That's almost a 2.5-hour drive for me with LA traffic. So yeah, I just do that. It's really a side gig that I do, but I enjoy it a lot. And so my typical day is I work about 9 to 6 or 9 to 7 on my regular job, and then from 6 or 7 until 9:30 at night, I'm doing editing from images I shot that weekend or during that week. And I'm working now with Volleyball magazine, and they're looking for only a handful of images the evening of an event. So if I'm going to shoot like a UCLA or USC men's volleyball match, I'll come back to my office before I go home and email them like 5 images from that match that they'll use in an article that early that next morning to be current. It's so important to be current in today's world with sports photography and sports images and sports stories.
Yes, I can imagine. Thanks a lot, Jim. Says Jose Gil Ramirez again. So your target audience is everyone rather than volleyball experts?
No, it's not volleyball experts, it's photo experts. My target expert is not professional photographers that might nitpick any one of my photos because all aspects of the lighting or the focus or the editing is not perfect to what they consider an ideal perfect photograph is. Perfectly executed relative to camera settings, photo editing, and everything else. The photo could be very boring, but it might be perfect in terms of the technical aspects of the photo. So my point was, I don't try to shoot to satisfy professional photographers that look for the perfect technical aspects of a photo. I shoot for the general masses that enjoy the sport, or maybe have never seen the sport, but are attracted to the sport because of seeing my images and seeing like, boy, I had no idea in beach volleyball that they're flying through the air that much, or in indoor volleyball that the players are jumping that high. So that I'm trying to grow the sport. In any sport I photograph, I'm trying to expand its market audience and expand its fan base by putting interesting photos out, in social media that will attract more people to that sport.
Yeah, and I think that's very, very important the job you do, because we have to grow the game, and that's
Yeah,
a very, very, very crucial part. The thing you do.
and unfortunately, what's happening now with COVID-19, it's devastating to the motorsports industry, because all of the at any given NASCAR event that I shoot or IndyCar event that I shoot, we could have anywhere from, I'll say, 200 to 350 photographers covering the event. And of those photographers, 95% are independent contractors. And NASCAR, and I'm expecting the same for IndyCar, they're limiting their photo coverage for this season's events now going forward since COVID-19 to really just a handful of photographers, like 2 from the event series, whether that's NASCAR or IndyCar, and maybe 1 or 2 from the track, and 1 or 2 from that have a contract with NASCAR or IndyCar. But all of these, so going forward at motorsports events, there's probably going to be 5 to at most 10 photographers covering the event versus 250 to 350 photographers that were making their living covering that event, and now are basically out of work because they can't get photo credentials. So it's I'm saddened to say that the future of sports photography doesn't look promising, and particularly until this COVID-19 gets figured out, until we find a cure for it. Until that point, sports photographers are really going to be challenged to try to, put food on the table.
Yes, well, if that's the situation in the USA, just imagine here in Mexico.
Yeah, I'm sure it's all over the world. It's going to be a worldwide epidemic for sports photographers trying to make a living. The livings, and a lot of these people have been making a living as sports photographers for 30 years, and they're suddenly out of work for the first time in their lives.
Yes, I know. So, well, another very good friend, Cesar Augusto from Mexico City too, says, "Hello, Jim. I know some of your work because Alex shared it with me, and I like it a lot. Do you have an Instagram account?"
I do. It's Jim Wolf, JIMWOLF 9426.
All right.
I don't post a lot on there. I will be, that's going to be changing in the near future here. The reason I haven't used Instagram a lot recently has been that, there has been limitations on the number of images you could post. They've just recently upped that to 10 basically. But before it was only, 1 or 2 images you could post at a time. And Instagram was great for photographers that maybe only capture 1 or 2 appealing images of an event. And then, there's so much time spent creating all the hashtags and everything else that it wasn't as good of a venue for me as Facebook was. The problem with Facebook now is all of these young athletes, college athletes, younger beach volleyball players, they have no interest in Facebook. So, I was fortunate in starting off when Facebook was the only game in town and was really popular. And every athlete I was photographing was on Facebook, and I could make that Facebook connection and Facebook, friendship with them. But now it's like, it's Instagram or nothing. So I'm being forced to evolve into Instagram, kicking and shoving, but you'll start seeing me posting more work on my Instagram account going forward than I have in the past, which has mainly been focused on Facebook. And the one thing about going on Facebook, you can look at my photo history and go back, 10, 15 years. So you can see a lot of different perspective of the game and how the game's changed and all the different teammates, relationships, and everything else. So there's quite a history of both indoor and beach volleyball on my Facebook account.
Yes, and how much do you think Instagram is changing the rules for social media, for the bad and for the good?
Well, it's definitely for the better because that's the only forum that young people are interested in today. Now that Facebook and Instagram are part of the same company, there's a more easier sharing platform between those two. If I post something on Instagram, you can just click the button if you wanted to share it to Facebook as well. So it's much more user friendly than it ever has been. And Instagram, you can have unlimited number of followers. With Facebook, you're limited in terms of the number of followers you can have, and I think I'm butting up against that limit. So it's just that alone is going to force me over to Instagram, and again, it's the future. It'll be interesting to see how Facebook survives in going forward relative to how popular Instagram is today, especially with the youth. So I'll be curious to see what changes Facebook makes to compete against Instagram, particularly for the younger market audience.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jim. Jose Gil Ramirez has another comment. Says, Jim, in some parts of the world and in some kinds of sports, Now, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the social distancing, some leagues like Professional Soccer League in Spain are thinking to produce its own media, especially photography. So that means leaving out many photographers. What do you think about this? It is the beginning of a new era in sport photography, talking as a job.
Yeah, it's just what I was mentioning that's happening with motorsports already. They're going to their in-house photographers or photographers that have a contract directly with the event promoter, NASCAR or IndyCar, or in his case, whatever the soccer league is. They'll have their on-staff photographers, and they may also have a contract with one or two other photographers, and that could be the totality of the number of photographers you're going to see covering the event. And it's really unfortunate because I know, let's take beach volleyball as an example. At any given tournament, there could be 6 or 7 matches going on at the same time. Well, unless you have 6 or 7 photographers, you can't get coverage of all of those matches. And even if you have just one photographer at a match, it's not that he's going to necessarily, or she is going to capture all of the great moments of that match, because they could be out of position. There could be a number of reasons why they don't capture every exciting moment of any given match. So, right now we have, for the early rounds, kind of the Friday and Saturday morning rounds, I'd say on average, we've got maybe 4 photographers per court is a standard right now for like the AVP on Friday and Saturday mornings. And then as you get into Saturday afternoon and Sunday, it starts ramping up to maybe, 8 to 10 photographers a court. So that's all going to change. And, even with a sport like soccer, where there's so much playing area, there's a lot of room for photographers at soccer and football events and what have you, because the field area is so large. So it's unfortunate that we're not going to be able to take advantage of those large geographic areas surrounding the fields of play because of the COVID-19 and concerns about social distancing. I think you're going to have marginal sports photography coverage over maybe the next year or so with this COVID-19 impact.
Okay.
Not to the same extent that we've seen in the past.
Well, that's a shame, but it's a reality, right?
It is. No.
Jim, what do you think about what is more important for a pro photographer? The equipment, the quality of the equipment, or the feeling in his job?
Well, I would have to go with the latter, the feeling, because I have very mediocre equipment. I don't have equipment anywhere near what my fellow photographers are using that have top of the line pro bodies and everything else. So the challenge I have, particularly on indoor, is the ISO settings, which are the basically the amount of light that can come into my camera. I'm very challenged, like on my camera versus a pro camera, to shoot in darker indoor facilities. And unfortunately, like when the USA men's and women's team does exhibition matches leading up to like an Olympic event or what have you, it's often hosted in small high school gymnasiums because they're trying to grow that school's, team support as well, and just give the younger athletes viewing of, top performing athletes in their sport, and just kind of motivate them to be, better.
It is the red versus blue matches, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, and sometimes they'll have it against countries. Just in late May or early June, the women's team was supposed to be playing China or Japan, because China or Japan was out here doing a training cycle with the USA women at the American Sports Center. So they were going to put on a sporting exhibition match between the two countries, and that got canceled, of course, with COVID-19. But they're typically in high school gymnasiums that have very poor lighting, and so I can't ramp up my shutter speed as much as I'd like to, because I need enough light coming into my camera, so I have to lower my shutter speed. So in relation to the pro photographers that have the pro bodies, I'm really at a disadvantage. And same thing on beach volleyball or outdoor photography. Their shutter speeds are 10 times what my shutter speed is on my cameras. So it's fun to be around them because it's literally like you're surrounded by 5 machine guns, because their shutter speeds, it's just rapid fire. And they're just, they've got their shutter depressed and it's just, and mine's like, boop, 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 So the advantage they have in that faster shutter speed is if a player is diving, and we'll see this in some of the photos coming up here, is what we always strive for as a photographer is ball on hand contact. And that's always kind of the pinnacle for a good sports photograph is ball on hand contact. And I'm limited because my shutter speed is about half of what a pro body shutter speed is. So I have about half of the opportunities to get that ball on hand contact as friends of mine that are shooting with the pro bodies, the D1s and the top of line Nikons and Canons, and now Sony, has gotten active into the sports photography business as well with their mirrorless cameras.
Okay. Which type of equipment do you have? They're asking me.
I have 2 Nikon D750s, which are kind of middle of the road camera bodies. And then, I have my 2 go-to lenses for beach volleyball and indoor for that matter. I'm almost exclusively using my f-stop 2.8 2470 millimeter lens.
2.8?
2.8 is the f-stop. So that gives you the fastest shutter speed and the most light coming into the camera, and the best pictures, quite honestly. And then the focal range is 24 to 70 millimeters. So it's a more shooting wide angle is what that's set up for, which again, I think is more perspective and more storytelling to the photo. It's not until I go up in the stands at like an indoor event that I'm using my 7200 lens, because then I'm shooting long distance and I'm usually shooting tight action at the net, hitter going against a double block or a triple block, something of that nature. So, but I would say at outdoor events, I'm 90% of the time I've got my 2470, and in indoor events, I'd say 80% of the time I'm using my 2470, and the rest of the time I'm using my 7200. And then rarely, occasionally for a big event like when the USA is playing Iran or, Brazil in a men's or women's exhibition match, and we've got a stadium filled of people, I'll get out my fisheye lens and I'll just get a shot of the entire indoor, arena filled to capacity with people holding up signs and everything else. So, but that's rare. That's only with a sellout group. One of the things that I'm cognizant of in shooting is you never want to have a background that has empty stands, because it's like, why am I interested in the sport if those stands aren't filled with people? So I'm always kind of cognizant of my camera angles and what the background is, and I'm always trying to make sure that I'm using fans in the stands with the angles that I'm shooting at, because again, the worst thing you can show is empty grandstands at a sporting event.
Yes, for sure. Well, Cesar Augusto, my friend from Mexico City, says, oh, he's a PhD in chemistry, by the way. I have the same equipment, he says.
Yeah, they're excellent. It's a great camera. It's, you're either Nikon or you're Canon. And now, there's some guys jumping into Sony. But I grew up loving Nikon, and I think their lenses have the best optical quality. I've gotten a little disheartened with Nikon going forward because they've been trying to put, a lot of the small businesses out of service. And I know a lot of small camera repair shops that have no longer been able to survive because Nikon no longer provides them parts so they can repair and fix cameras. So I've been a little disheartened with that. And Nikon is also using the consumer to beta test a lot of their new products. So they're like, let's let the public buy this new body for a year, and the public can tell us, what glitches need to be fixed in the camera, and then we'll figure that out from that, rather than testing them for like a year before they go to market. So going forward, I might tell someone new to photography to maybe focus on Canon or even Sony if they're looking for a mirrorless body over Nikon, just because Nikon has gotten a little kind of big corporate in terms of their ideology, and I don't like what they're doing to some of the small businesses that have relied on Nikon for a number of years. So, but yeah, they're good bodies, and I have two of them. So at Motorsports, I've got two cameras strapped to my side, and they have different focal length lenses, so I can pull them up rapid fire and have them readily available to me. In beach volleyball and indoor as well, I only use one body, because you never know when a player is going to be diving for a ball that's shanked serve or something, a shanked pass. So I always want to be able to roll out of the way and get out of a player's way. If I've got two bodies with me, it's much more difficult to do in beach or indoor. So I only carry one body with me when I'm filming volleyball.
Okay, Jose Gil Ramirez says, and I do agree with him, because we have worked in a lot of volleyball matches. He says the difference is that we shoot in forums with just a half of the lights working.
Yeah, it's
Mexico,
true.
In Mexico.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not only is your equipment very important, but the lighting in the facility is very important. And the other thing you have to be aware of too when you're shooting in indoor facilities is where those lights are positioned in an arena. Because that can be right in line with a shot you're trying to get, and you have this huge glaring light that's in the backdrop of your photo, and it's really, really challenging to try to get a decent photo with that huge light fixture right in your background in your line of angle. So yeah, it's when I get into any facility I haven't shot in, the first thing I'm doing is looking at where the light standards are, where the light fixtures are, and then I kind of try to position myself so those light fixtures will have as less of an impact as possible on my shots. So that's just kind of some of the due diligence I do when I first walk into a new gym I haven't been to before.
And in which of the Southern California NCAA venues of volleyball do you like the most for photography, and the less?
Well, so it would have to be USC and UCLA. I mean, USC, that facility is just what I'd call a mini version of Staples Center, where the Lakers and the Clippers play. I mean, it's just
is the Galen Center, right, for the USC venue? Is the Galen Center?
Yes, the Galen Center, correct. It's beautiful. I mean, it is just a gorgeous facility, and the lighting is good in there. I mean, it's kind of universal lighting around the entire arena, so that works well. And they're good about the other thing that makes a facility good or bad is where the photographers are allowed to be. So USC is very lenient on photographer positioning. UCLA is as well, and I like shooting in UCLA, and both UCLA and USC have those huge, hanging from the ceiling over the court video monitors, whatever you want to call them, that have the big screen TV and the scoreboard and everything else hanging from the center of over the center of the court. So those can be interesting backdrops for photos. Some of the arenas that I don't like is really more so those that aren't well set up for photographers, where we can't get in a good position to get good photos. Like UC Irvine, for example, they have a row of kind of a table that's up, that's set up for photographers and media where we can sit. But what they've done is they put about a 12-inch lip on the front of that table. And I think it's just so it's blocking the image of laptops and papers and everything else from people across the court from seeing. But by doing so, I can't see the lower half of the court. I can't see, digs that are being made on serve receptions or anything that, unless I'm like literally almost kneeling on my chair. So and then the other thing that UCI does is they have little bleachers for kind of players and uh, staff and what have you behind one of the ends of the court, and they won't let anybody sit in the first 3 rows of those bleachers, which to me is it's ridiculous. So a lot of facilities that I'm not enthusiastic about shooting in are either facilities that don't have good lighting, or they're really overly restrictive on where photographers can be.
The pyramid in Long Beach is a good place for photographers.
Yeah. So the pyramid at Long Beach State, that's a really cool venue, and I mean, if you haven't been in there, it's really it's really impressive based on the size of it and the magnitude and the ceiling height and everything else. The problem with Long Beach, though, is they've got lighting from 4 different lighting sources, and each of those light sources are in the corners of each of the 4 sides of the court. So if you're shooting any action at the net and you're shooting upwards, like I like to do, I'm needing to do post-production processing to soften the glare coming out of those light fixtures that are inevitably part of the background in the photos that I shoot. But otherwise, it's a cool building. It's that pyramid-shaped building, and it's almost breathtaking when you first walk in there if you've never been in there before, just based on the magnitude of that ceiling height.
Yes, of course.
And the other thing about Long Beach is their scoreboard is against one of the walls on the back court, and that puts out a lot of light. So if you're shooting from the other side of the court and you have that lighted scoreboard illuminated, it detracts from your subjects, the volleyball players, because that lighting is so bright, and I have to work around that when I'm shooting from what would be kind of the north end of the court, because their scoreboard's kind of on the south end of the court.
Yes, I remember perfectly the pyramid. Oh, Jose Gil Ramirez says again, have you ever tried the Nikon D500?
No, I did it once, and I had horrible results with it. I know it's got a great sensor to it. It's not full frame. I'm a big full frame believer because I like wide angle, so I didn't like that aspect of the 500. And I shot it for a red blue scrimmage that the USA Women put on, and I rented that camera for that event, and I got horrible images, and the lighting wasn't good. And I've talked ever since that happened. I talked to many sports photographers, and they said that there's some challenges with the D500 relative to some of the photo editing I was using, software I was using, and it was a dimly lit gym, so I was challenged from the first place because the gym had such poor lighting. So I can't blame it entirely on that D500. But again, that's a DX format, so it doesn't have the full frame nature of the D750 has, or some of the other the other pro bodies that Nikon produces. So but it's got a great sensor. It's got a sensor that's much better than my camera. It's got a faster shutter speed. I think it has a higher ISO than my camera has, but I don't like the crop nature of that body. I like the wider, more open, full frame nature that my D750 has.
All right, great. How often, Jim, are you allowed to be at the court level?
I would say almost every venue we're allowed at court level. It's whether or not you can sit on the court or not. Some venues allow you to sit on the court, which is perfect for me because I like getting as low as possible. And other venues like UCI have it where you have to sit at that table and shoot from behind that table, which I don't like. And then, like for the NCAAs, what they did for like the NCAA men's or women's volleyball tournament, they have a similar row of tables like that along the one side of the court where you're able to sit and get a position. And they don't have that big lip like that we had at UCI. So those are okay to shoot from there. But I think I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say there's 5 photographers at each NCAA event that have a armband that allows us to sit on the court. And at the last NCAA men's indoor championships, I was fortunate enough through Volleyball magazine to have one of those armbands. So I was actually one of the few photographers that was allowed to sit on the court, and that's that's my ideal, in terms of a shooting location.
Great. And what do you uh, what do you what's the correct question? What do you miss more from analog photography to versus digital photography?
Well, there's not much I miss about analog, because starting off in motorsports photography, uh, as obvious, the most important lap of any motorsports race is the last lap, and the winners crossing the finish line. And pre-digital, when we were using our film cameras, and I did have several film cameras, you were generally using a 36 exposure roll of film. So you had 36 images on that roll of film. So inevitably, as the racers were crossing what they call the white flag, which is the last lap of the race, you'd see every photographer drop what they were doing and immediately take out, replace their roll of film with a fresh roll of film, because you had to make sure that you were going to capture that last lap and the winners coming across the finish line with those 36 images that you had available on your roll of film. There were some rolls of films that had more than 36 images, but the standard was 36 images. So, now that's like a 2 blast sequence, 36 images, and you couldn't shoot as fast. The purists out there still, there's still guys that have film cameras and still really enjoy them. And growing up as a kid, my father had a dark room in our basement, so he used to process his own photographs and did his own printing right in our basement. It was all black and white. We didn't have color processing back then, but so I grew up with a purist that really enjoyed film photography. But digital, it's far less expensive because you're not buying rolls of film constantly. It's far less polluting because you don't have all those film canisters, and it just you can get your memory cards that are perfectly aligned for whatever the event you're shooting. So you can get faster speed memory card versus a slower speed memory card, so on and so forth. And you can get memory cards with larger capacity versus smaller capacity. Now with shooting with volleyball, volleyballmag.com, I'll often carry a smaller memory capacity cards with me. And if I get, I'll keep shooting on that smaller capacity card. It doesn't hold as many images, is what I'm trying to say. And when I get 1 or 2 really good images, I'll take that card out and put it in my pocket and put a new card in the camera, because now I've got a card that I can quickly download at my office and produce some good images, some great images, without having to spend a long time downloading my memory cards into my computer. So there's a lot more flexibility you have with digital than that you didn't have, in the pre-digital ages.
And how many shoots do you take in an NCAA volleyball game?
Yeah, it's for like an evening match, which might have semifinals and a finals or something like that. I'll probably shoot around 5,000 images, 3,500 to 5,000 images. At a race event where you're at the event from 8 in the morning until 8 at night, I'll shoot 15,000 images a day and have 30 to 40,000 images for a 3-day weekend. So it's a lot. So for anybody watching that is looking to get into sports photography, the best thing I can tell you is to purchase what a software called Photo Mechanic, and all of my images get downloaded into Photo Mechanic from the camera into Photo Mechanic, and I use that as a culling system to eliminate photos that I know that I'm not going to end up using for whatever reason. So I go through those and I quickly edit out, cull out, eliminate the photos that I don't want to use. And I can do that with rapid fire. You can just go through them really quickly through Photo Mechanic, get down to the images that are, your top-notch images basically. And then those I download into Lightroom, and then I start doing my photo edits from that reduced number of images. But for anybody that edits a fair number of images, Photo Mechanic is a great starting point before you go into Lightroom.
Okay,
and I also just use Lightroom. I don't use Photoshop. Basically, Lightroom is really best set up for sports photography and handles 98% of your needs for sports photography.
Lightroom is called?
Lightroom. It's paired with, it's part of Photoshop. Photoshop has like 2 different elements to it. And Lightroom is one of the elements and Photoshop is the other element. You buy them together. But Lightroom is much more user friendly. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles that Photoshop has, but you rarely need all of those bells and whistles with sports photography. It's really more for commercial photography and other work of that nature that Photoshop is more germane to, but Lightroom is great for sports photography.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jim. So if you are okay, we'll go to the pictures you sent me.
Sure.
I remember you. We are talking with Jim Wolf, a master photographer of volleyball, beach volleyball, motorsports, and cycling. Okay, it's okay.
So this, as I was saying, this is how I got started in motorsports photography, shooting the motorsports models. I started shooting very early on for 2 different modeling agencies that provide these umbrella girls for different motorsports. So it's particularly prominent in motorcycle racing because when the racers are coming back from their sighting lap, and even before they do their sighting lap, they're sitting in full leathers with a helmet on, and it could be 110 degrees on that track. And in certain countries that they race, it can be very high in humidity as well. So if you were sitting in the bright sunlight and heat and humidity in your full leathers, you'd be soaking wet. So the umbrella does 2 things. It not only keeps the rider cool, but it also keeps the gasoline in the gasoline tank from evaporating, which is very important for motorcycle racing. And now you've seen motorsports models evolve into all different types of motorsports. So it's in IndyCar, NASCAR, virtually everything. But it had its roots in motorcycle racing, and that's how I got into it and started getting credentialed through these motorsports modeling agencies. One of which is Monster Energy drink that I've been shooting for 15, 20 years now. So this is one example, but I rarely post images like that on social media because the world being so politically correct, and I don't want to, offend anybody thinking that I shouldn't be posting images like this. So you'll rarely see me posting an image like this today versus this is how I got into sports photography and where I'm at today.
Right.
And this is Sarah Hughes, of course, the stellar player. So again, this is getting back to that hand on ball contact point. So we as sports photographers, you kind of have a little bit of a challenge because this is kind of the image you want because you want that ball touching her hand. But quite honestly, a more exciting image would almost be a 1 or 2 second delay after this shot, because that's when her body would be in full extension, 3 or 4 feet off the sand, but the ball would be out of the shot. So it's an ongoing challenge we have as photographers in these diving shots is, do I want to use this shot where her hand is touching the ball, or do I want to use my next 2nd or 3rd shot from this where she's literally horizontal to the ground and 3 or 4 feet above the ground, but unfortunately the ball's not in sight. So that's, but Sarah's, so the other thing, So when I go into a match, I kind of know, I know the players and their tendencies and who's more likely to give me an exciting photo. And in this case, Sarah's always good for some exciting photos because she just goes for it. You know, she's always diving around the court. You can always get some really neat action photos from Sarah because she's just, kind of a bulldog, and she's going to go for every ball that she can possibly get her hand on.
Yes, and it's obvious at this time, you know which player does more spectacular blocking or more spectacular attacking or more spectacular digging. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. You know each player's strengths and their tendencies and their habits, court positioning, everything. So, if I know a big hitter is going to go up against a big blocker, that's where I'm focusing on that point. If it's not so much a big hitter or big blocker, but two extremely exciting backcourt players, I'm going to focus more on the backcourt action. So, yeah, to your point, it's knowing the players and who creates exciting images.
great.
So this is your standard jump serve. But what I like about it is the backlighting with the sand, the blast of the sand coming up from his feet. And I like the backlighting and all the flags that are flying up above him. So to me, it's an interesting photo from the standpoint of where the sun was positioned and how it's lighting up his back and all of his muscles and the sand that he, is launching off of. And again, showing the full crowd, So I wouldn't have taken this shot if there was a third of those people in the grandstands. Like if it was a Thursday or early Friday morning and maybe a third of those stands were full, I wouldn't have been shooting at this angle because I don't want to see grandstands that are less populated. And this is Jeff Samuels, so there are certain players that have really big vertical jumps. So those players that I know can really get out of the sand, I'll position myself to capture their athleticism and show, just what incredible athletes they are. So this is, me coming to that court and saying, oh, there's Jeff, I know he's going to jump out of the sand like nobody else. So I'm going to get as close to, him as possible and capture his incredible vertical leap and incredible athleticism. And this is also Jeff Samuels. He has one of the best sky serves on the beach, along with the gentleman out of, God, his name slips me right now. There's a player that used to play in U.S. tournaments. He's a foreign player. Adrian Colombo. Adrian, what's Adrian's last name? You guys should know this. But he's out of, I think he might be out of Mexico or Colombia or someplace, but he also has a great sky serve. But he's had some visa issues, which have not allowed him to play in the U.S. for a number of years now. So I really miss him because he's a character as well. But Jeff Samuels is probably the best sky server on the beach today. And it took me about 4 or 5 attempts to get him a picture of the ball wrapping around his wrist as he's launching into one of his incredible sky serves. The velocity that his arm is coming up and the speed that his arm is coming up at, to try to get ball contact like that, again, it took me about 4 or 5 attempts before I finally got that point of contact and the ball literally warping around his wrist as he's making contact on his sky serve.
Yeah, and this is a spectacular pick. It's not a blocking, it's not a spike, but it's a spectacular picture.
Yeah, it's his sky serve. And I love sky serves. When I was playing beach volleyball, that was kind of my go-to serve. And you very rarely see players doing that these days. And it's a great serve, particularly if there's a little wind in the air and the ball is going to get a lot of movement in the air because of the wind. And these guys now that are playing today, they're so precise on their placement of their sky serves that they can get that ball to fall just over the net. So now you as the receiver, you're really challenged on where you can pass that ball because it's so tight to the net. So I've seen a lot of aces off of sky serves. And, you know, occasionally you're going to have one that launches out of the court, but it's to be expected. But the fans love it. You know, the fans are eager for it. And I've seen players trash talk their competition. Jeff doesn't do it, but I've seen other players that do sky serves, and they'll try, you know, Rosie does it. And Rosie actually got Phil Dahlhauser to do a sky serve once just by harassing him enough during a match once that Phil said, fine, I'll do it if you'll shut up, I'll do it. And Phil did it. And I as I recall, it landed in. So I like sky serve.
I think currently in the FIVB circuit, an Italian guy, I don't know, it's Carambula. I think Carambula is
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, he's got a great sky serve. He's probably the best on the beach, and he talks trash too. I love Adrian. So I enjoy watching his matches and attending his matches. But again, unfortunately, he hasn't been playing in the USA for a number of years now because of some visa issues.
Yes, I know. And in the vintage volleyball, who was the greatest sky server?
Oh, there were a lot of them. You know, pretty much everybody sky served back in old school days. I'm not sure I could say that who was the best back then because it was so common. And because that was really almost your most offensive serve you could do, because everything else was just, you know, a float serve without jumping, you know. So if you didn't do a sky serve, a normal serve wasn't that difficult to pass. And the sky serves, especially if the sun was in a proper position or the wind was blowing. And then the other thing, a lot of guys, more so in the old school than you see today, we used to do roundhouse serves. So if you were serving into the wind, a variation of the sky serve was when you'd come over the top of the ball and get tremendous topspin on the ball. And that was a kind of a variation of the sky serve, and we called them a roundhouse serve. And used to be very effective serving into the wind. But I haven't seen a roundhouse serve, quite honestly, in probably at least 10 years now. They don't do it anymore because they're doing the overhead jump serves that they can get, you know, the same amount of topspin on the overhead jump serves.
Right.
And so this is 95% of your sports photography indoor volleyball photographs. And again, this is taken from the stands. A lot of photographers like to shoot from the stands because they don't want to deal with all the bodies being in the way. Because remember, on an indoor volleyball, you've got 12 people on the court, and that's 12 people that hopefully are out of the shot to allow you to get the image that you want. You know, to get around that, you go up in the stands and you shoot tight like this, and you can get some pretty cool reactions, you know, some player faces and what have you, ball contact on spikes, on blocks and what have you. But this is 95% of your standard sports photography photo content that you'll see for volleyball. And it's fine. You know, I don't condone, you know, I'm not against it at all, but to me, it doesn't tell that much of a story, because I don't know if player 11 is jumping 40 inches off the ground and player 16 is only jumping 2 inches off the ground, or vice versa, you know. So unless you have a full frame image and you can see the court and how high each player is jumping, you know, in this case, both these girls are tall, you know, they're 6'3", 6'4", you know, Elaine Rudden's on the left and Bob Lanier's daughter on the right. Bob Lanier, if you don't know, the girl number 16, her father was one of the top NBA players in his day. He played for the Detroit Pistons for years and years and years, and was one of the top centers in the NBA. And Kayla, his daughter, and obviously inherited his genes, and she's a great indoor player, and it's been fun to watch her. And for the senior night at USC, Bob and his wife came to the match, and I introduced myself between games, and told him how much I actually was fortunate to see him play in person when he was playing in the NBA, and told him how much I enjoyed watching him play in person as well as on TV. And it was just a fun a fun little moment for me to be able to interface with him just through his daughter being a player at USC. But again, so this is the only tight photo I've included in this collection, because this is what you'll see in 95% of your published images of volleyball is tight action like this.
Yes. Wow, very nice picture.
Yeah, so this is Taylor. So another challenge we have in volleyball is there's been so many times where you'll have a great picture of hand contact on ball with the player diving, and the ball will totally obscure the player's face. In this case, it's only obscuring a portion of Taylor's hair, but you can still see that it's Taylor Crabb. And even though, part of his face is shaded, you can still tell it's him. But again, it's every sports photographer that covers beach volleyball will tell you the hundreds of photographs they have like this, but that ball is literally positioned right in front of his face, and you can't even tell what player it is. So you basically just throw out that image. If you can't tell what player it is, you don't keep that image. But as great as it might be, it's unfortunate.
But do you think this kind of photos is a matter of luck, or is a matter of being the right place at the right moment?
For me, it's not luck, because again, I know Taylor is like Sarah Hughes that I described earlier. You'll get a lot of action out of Taylor in the backcourt, because Taylor also is a player that goes for everything and just lays out for any ball that's in his general zip code. So on a play, especially if it's a free ball or something where it's not the two players that are hitting and blocking aren't necessarily exciting players, I'm going to focus on Taylor on this point. So there may be, I may have been focused on Taylor now for 5 seconds leading up to this point, and I track him. I track his movements in the backcourt, and I'm using just a partial depression on my shutter, so my autofocus is tracking him as he moves throughout the backcourt. And then I'm as it gets ready for a point of action where the ball's going to be coming into frame, I'm then starting a fast sequence of shutters, and this might be a 3 to 5 shot blast where I'm starting it right before he touches the ball, and I'm continuing shooting until the ball leaves his hand. And I'm hoping that I'll get an image. See, this image isn't great because, again, it isn't ball touching hand like we really hoped for, but it's close enough, and I'm getting him more vertical than I might otherwise have if it was ball touching hand.
Right.
And this again, this is a player that he's a bigger guy. He's a well-built guy, but he gets some great dives. And in all the matches I've shot of him, it's always fun. This is Roberto Rodriguez, and for the size and his muscularity, he covers that backcourt really well. And I always get some nice airborne shots of him, despite the fact that he's a bigger guy, muscularity wise. And this is again the ball on hand contact. So again, and this is a photo that we normally would use because it's ball on hand, but I'll guarantee you that the next 1 or 2 images after this, his body is fully horizontal, flying through the air, but the ball is out of the frame. So it's again a little bit of a dilemma of what to use, and what kind of your all-time best image is. An all-time best image would have had his feet off the ground, his body horizontal, and his hand touching the ball. But normally the body doesn't become horizontal until after you've touched the ball.
Yes, of course. Oh, TJ DeFalco, Josh Toniga, they're
yeah. So TJ is one of my most fun indoor players to shoot. and primarily with, well, two reasons. Well, first of all, he's not big in stature. He's like 6'3" on a good day, but he can jump out of the gym, and his arm swing is amazing. So, you know, the worst player I would ever want to shoot is a big player with no vertical jump and a weak arm swing. And there's a lot of those tall players that are like that, male and female, because they've been able to get away with, you know, not needing to be a big jumper, because they've been able to get away with it their whole lives. But TJ, he hits from the back row like no one I've ever seen. And in this case, they've isolated at least one of the blockers by the middle hitter, faking hitting on the middle, and then TJ's hitting out of the back row, and he can sky.
Yes, I know these both guys, Josh and TJ, 4 years ago, where they came here to Mexico City for Pan Am Cup.
Oh, did they? Yeah.
Yeah, with coach Ron Larson.
Yeah.
And the assistant coach was Sean Rooney.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Wow.
So here's TJ's blocking abilities too. That's TJ on the left, number 11. He gets more straight down blocks than probably any player I've seen. And he's not a middle blocker. He's an outside hitter. And his blocking skills are tremendous. And you can see that ball is going straight down, and how high he is over the net. You know, his armpits are well over the top of the net there.
Well, another player who I like the way he blocks, it's Colton Cowell. It's also not so tall.
Yes, another great blocker. And I think I have a photo of him hitting in here.
Yeah, I met Colton last year in Pan Am Cup in Colima, Mexico.
I love him. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, great guy.
And here is Tia Lima, I think is how she pronounces it. She's a flyer. And so here's a picture of what I was telling you. She's already touched the ball. And so this is the ball coming off of her hands. But when that point of contact was, her feet were in the sand. So this is what I was saying earlier. You have your choice of either touching ball contact on hand with feet in sand, or getting this, you know, flying through the air image of her just after the ball has left her hand. And here's David Lee that we talked about earlier. He was, you know, one of the top blockers in indoor men's volleyball internationally. And he took that blocking knowledge and skill to the beach, you know, two or 3 years ago. And he's applied that indoor blocking skill to the beach. And here, you know, Troy Field, which he's one of the bigger jumpers on the beach, it's a straight down block, because David is a force to be reckoned with blocking at the net. And here he's proving that. And this is an interesting backdrop too. This is, I think that's Hermosa or Manhattan. I can't remember which, but it's I like the backdrop with the buildings there. Kind of cool.
And David Lee is playing with Rosie, right?
Yes. Yeah. His first time playing with a major player.
All right. Well, here Octavio Medina have a question. Octavio Medina, a friend of mine, he's from Mexico, but he's living in near to Seattle, Washington. He says, how many Mexican tournaments have you attended, and what's your favorite male and female Mexican couples, if you know any?
I know a couple. I don't say that I have a favorite. There's a lot of them that I really like. I've not shot any tournaments in Mexico. I played a couple, but they were just, you know, small informal tournaments, you know, just south of Tijuana. But I've not shot any tournaments in Mexico. I hope to one day. And then, you know, I don't think I have a favorite player, male or female. There's every, you know, there's so many great players, and I like players that give me good action, you know, that, and have some kind of personality. That's what I'm looking for in my favorites.
Well, you should know Viviana Candela. She played in USC, yes. A 3-time All-American, and she's an Olympian beach volleyball player in Beijing, 2008. Well,
one of my favorite indoor players is Sammy Bricio, that played for USC. She brought jump serving to women's college volleyball, and was a force to be reckoned with. She would intimidate the world out of her opponents with her jump serve. And I loved shooting her when she was playing at USC, really. And I've had a long relationship with her father. And
Guillermo Bricio.
Yes, she now is playing, has been playing internationally for years now and is often an MVP of the different leagues that she plays in.
Yeah, well, next season she will play in Dynamo Kazan in Russia.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. This is not an action shot, but it's the players cutting down. It's the Long Beach State players cutting down the net when they won the NCAA championships last year. So it's kind of the customary championship photo you take of either cutting down the volleyball net or for basketball, cutting down the basketball net.
This is the last year when they won the back-to-back, right?
When they beat Hawaii, right. And this is the team in their kind of championship photo. This, it's a tough photo because you've got 800 photographers climbing on top of one another trying to get this shot. So you see I've got a lens to the right of me that I couldn't quite avoid getting free of all of the cameras that were around me, but that's as close as I could get. And it's a fun photo. You got TJ front and center with the trophy, and it's a fun shot. And the team was, it was a great year for them. And this was, this isn't so much a great action shot, but I like the colors in it. It's got a lot of colors, and I'm at a low angle, so I'm shooting up. It's almost the line of sight that she had as the ball was coming to her. And again, it's not like she's flying 10 feet through the air, but I liked all the colors, and I liked kind of the, just the shooting angle that I was shooting here.
Who is she? Who is this couple of players?
I don't remember who that was offhand. I don't know that. Not sure.
Okay. Wow.
And this I like just because of the spacing. Again, when you're with indoor, you've got to have players away from you. And I was fortunate that the pass was off the net, so the setter had to come off the net for this, and he had to actually, really move to get to this ball. And in the process, kind of splitting his legs, he's able to get a great jump set off. And he wasn't obscured by hitters that were, in between me and him. So I just kind of liked how this picture came to be. And again, some of it is luck. The fact that the pass wasn't up to the net, he had to come off the net. In doing so, his kind of legs split like that, and he's still able to get a great jump set off. And here's Taylor. Again, it's not quite touching the ball, but I like his facial expression and his sunglasses. I like, all of those things kind of are captivating, and kind of draw your attention to him and his face. Even though ideally his hand would have been contacting the ball in a perfect world. And this one, I like. It's a great joust. These are two big jumpers, and you knew that was going to be about a 2-second joust when nobody wanted to give up. I like the sand blasting off of each of their feet, and I like the big screen TV in the background. Even though it's about a 2-second delay on that screen, you can kind of see the real world, what's happening, not only in front of you but also on the screen that's being televised to the crowd and to the television audience behind. So, with two big guys at a net, if it's a joust situation, that can be a really interesting photograph. And you can often see the ball just compressing between their hands as each of them are exerting all of their energy to push that ball forward.
Yeah, I think in both volleyball and beach volleyball, a power play like this one is one of the most attractive plays for the fans.
Yeah, men and women. I've seen some really good women jousts too. And I like the sand blasting off of each of their feet like that. So if going back a second, if that image was tight and I just had their hands and maybe their heads, you wouldn't see all that action with the sand launching off the beach. So I like to shoot more wide angle than my fellow sports photographers. Most of them would have been, zoomed in more closely on the hands touching the ball and maybe their heads, like that. That would have been, I would guess that 90% of the people I was shooting around, that was the image that they took.
But as you told us a minute ago, this is composition.
Yes. And that's Rafe. He's a flyer. You know, he's always going to fly around the backcourt, and you know, he's tan. You know, he's got a lot of muscular definition, and the women love his hair. You know, he's got really long hair that he pulls back in a ponytail when he's playing. But he's always going to, you know, he's a guy that I know I'm going to go to the court and I'm going to focus some time and energy on tracking his movements on the court, because I know he's going to give me a good shot. And this is Troy. You know, Troy, for a big guy who really can jump out of the sand, he's also really mobile. A lot of it is he's young. I mean, he's in his early 20s, and he can cover the backcourt as well as he can block and hit. So it's fun to see, you know, get him in action in a backcourt position. And this is Jeremy Casebeer. The reason I like this photo is because he basically landed right on top of me after contacting this, but he was well off the court. And I like the grit and the intensity on his face, just tracking this ball down in the first place, and then delivering an incredible set that his partner put away for a point after doing this amazing, you know, backcourt dig. And the sun was perfect. You know, I got the sun right on his face. So that was nice to have. And here's my favorite indoor men's player, Kofi at UCLA. You know, actually, no, I take that back. This is his teammate from Hawaii. What's his name? Let me see. Drawing a blank on his name right now. But he's another big jumper. You know, UCLA's got some real big jumpers. But I just kind of like the reflections of the players off the court. You know, all of the kind of the backdrop with the Long Beach, you know, in the stadium, the scoreboard, everything else. But what I really like is the players' legs reflecting off the court and how high he is. And, you know, this is kind of the elevation these players are getting on their jump serves in college now.
Yeah, right. Does he jump more than Taylor Sander, do you think?
Jump more than what?
Than Taylor Sander. Because Taylor Sander is a big jumper.
I think Taylor might, they're about the same size physically. I think Taylor might have a little bit more of a vertical. You know, he's coming off of a major knee surgery. He had in the match last year at UCLA, he blew out his knee to where it was touch and go whether he was ever going to play again. You know, they had the emergency medical personnel come down on the court and took him out on a stretcher, and it was a devastating injury. And this is, you know, the next season, and he's still getting incredible vertical jump with a totally reconstructed knee.
Wow.
And this is April. This is the player introductions. You know, we talked about the AVP earlier. They do a really good job about, you know, kind of player introductions and getting crowd enthusiasm up and bringing these kids in there to kind of form a high five line as the players, you know, come onto the court for the start of the match. And this is April coming for the championship match. It was either at Hermosa or Manhattan. I think that was Manhattan last year for the AVP. And this is, again, growing the sport, as we talked about earlier, getting young kids excited about the sport. And, you know, none of those young kids will ever forget that moment. And this is Kofi. So this is my favorite indoor player, guy out of Canada. So watch for him in the Canadian men's indoor team in the Olympics. He can jump out of the gym. And this is at Long Beach. So you've got that unlimited ceiling height to capture all of his verticality. But he's a flyer, you know, and I love shooting him, and we kind of have a relationship together, and he knows when I'm there and I know when he's in a position, and it's a fun combination to have. And this is one of the let's see, is that, I can't think of it. That's one of the, what I liked about this player. This is one of the Pepperdine players playing. What I liked about this was just the kind of, again, how much air these kids are getting in college volleyball for their jump serves, and how that's really changed scoring and backcourt play. And if you've got a good jump serve and you can find someone in the backcourt that is challenged on your jump serve, you can capitalize on that. And you can bet, he can get 3 or 4 aces off the same person by just finding a weakness in their backcourt. And this, digs are a hard shot to get, and pancake digs, particularly in indoor volleyball, because there's so many people in the way. This was a shot, what I like about this is kind of the illuminated banner in the background, showing that it's the 2019 NCAA National Men's Volleyball Championship. A better picture would have been with, again, ball contacting his hand. But again, these are the hardest shots to get in volleyball, because there's so many players that are getting in your way of getting a shot like this.
All right.
And this is Zanu, former UCLA beach volleyball player that is now playing in the AVP. She's also girlfriend with the former UCLA setter. So there, you talk about volleyball pedigree. If they end up marrying and having children, those kids will be incredible volleyball players. But she's always fun to watch. Really a gritty player, and I think there's either the next photo or one after it, you can see kind of her grittiness in her face when she's going for a dig coming at me. This is a player out of Lewis, the college in Chicago. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is this is, again, shooting from the stands with a long lens, but it shows the complexities of the offenses that these colleges are running now, and how often you can get a hitter in place where there's no blocker because they've run such a complex offensive scheme that the blockers can't respond to that, or they've been taken out of the play by other fake hitters, basically. And just seeing a open hit like this is every hitter's dream of having a no block scenario, and this is one of them. Now this is Colton, who you talked about from Hawaii, your buddy.
Yes, my buddy. Great guy.
This was probably the most impressive offensive play I've ever seen in college volleyball. Colton was back middle, or no, I take that back. He was middle front on serve reception. He took serve reception. The setter came in and faked a set to the incoming angle, the guy that was sliding angle from hitting from onside, who's the player you can barely see, just to the left of number 13 in Long Beach. So it isolated not only 2 of the blockers from Long Beach State that thought that slicing player coming in from the sideline was going to take the set. He ended up passing on the set. Colton ended up doing a reverse around X. They basically ran an X on this play, and Colton ended up hitting from outside by running around the whole play and taking the set that everybody else thought was going to the outside hitter that was coming middle, and Colton went from middle to outside, and you can see he was just hitting uncontested. It was just a work of perfection, in terms of offensive schemes.
Yeah, this is a great shot, Jim.
It was, the crowd went nuts, even though 90% of the fans there were for Long Beach State. Just the appreciation for that offensive scheme and how well they ran it. It was a work of art.
Whew, yes.
And this again is showing not only TJ's blocking ability, but the whole team's blocking ability from Long Beach. All 3 of those players are so far over the net that you can see how challenging that is to be a hitter playing against Long Beach State last year. And here's the Lion King. I can never remember his name. It's
Smerins or Samulovs.
Yeah, it's what is he called? Alexandros Samolias, the Lion.
Yeah. The guys from Latvia, great guys.
Yes, correct, correct. So he's great because he's an exciting player. He's got a lot of personality um, and fun to watch. I really enjoy playing with him, photographing him, and the women love him with his long hair and everything.
Yes, I know. Very Californian style.
Yeah, exactly. Good guy. Yeah, and here's one of the best blockers on the beach from Canada, and she can really block well. And her name, I'm looking for it here. Oh, can't think of it right now. Crap. But anyway, she's a really strong blocker, and she's going against one of the top hitters on the beach out of USC. So it just shows that women can block straight down as well as men and get some really nice verticality on their jumping out of the sand.
Yeah, great picture.
And that's, what this isn't a spectacular photo, but it's nice because, it shows a lot and tells a story. The setter put up a great set, the hitter's hitting uncontested, and you can see the defensive player kind of getting in position to try to dig her ball. But it just, I kind of liked it, because it's kind of the rule of three, thirds, where you kind of have action throughout the whole frame, and you're filling up the frame with action. And although she's not, the biggest jumper, but it's right at point of contact, and I just kind of like the shot. Oh, that previous girl name doing the block was Brandy Wilkerson out of Canada. Great blocker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's always going to put up some really big blocks. So I'm focusing on her if she's playing versus maybe some of the backcourt players, because I know she's going to come up with some big, straight down stuff blocks like this.
Yeah, a really young talent, right?
Yeah. So this is Xanu again out of UCLA. She just has a great intensity to her, and you can just see it in her face, how she's just giving every inch of effort possible to try to make this dig. And she does. She's a really gritty, scrappy player that I love shooting, players like her.
And this is Hermosa Beach.
Yes. Now what I like about this is how these setters in today's men's volleyball have usually 4 hitting options on every time they're setting the ball. And here you see 3 of his hitting options. What you don't see is the far right opposite, who is also in a hitting position. So I like that the arm swing on the 2 guys that were further back, as well as the upward motion of the middle quick, so as a defender, you've got to empathize with them, because, is it the middle quick? Is he going to get the set? Is it the outside hitter that's going to get the set? Or, is he going to go with the back row hitter out of the back row, or launch a back set here and go to the opposite? So I just kind of like the flow of the game, and how all of the, everything kind of blends together at once, and how the setter has so many different weapons at their disposal. And again, another picture of TJ's blocking ability, straight down. I think that's TJ. Yeah.
Yeah, it's TJ.
Yeah. I mean, he's, most people think of him as an incredible jump server and as a great hitter out of the back row, but he can block with the best of them. And this is what is her name? Maria Clara Salgado. She's a great player as well. She's a really, she'll give you some great images every match you shoot of her. Enjoy shooting her.
And she's from?
I think she's from Mexico originally. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure where she lives, quite honestly. If she lives up here in Southern California, or or out of the country. But
What's her name?
yeah,
Maria what?
Maria Clara Salgado.
Okay, I will Google her.
Yeah, she's fun to watch. Really
Yeah,
entertaining.
but it's not the first time I heard of her, but I don't know her.
She's fun. She's a lot of fun and a great athlete.
Right.
And there's Kofi again. So this is at UCLA. You know, I shouldn't say this, but he saw me, the position I was in. I knew he was going to be hitting from this position. So he kind of mentioned to the setter, like, if available, set me. And this was the outcome of that discussion he had with his setter. And this, you know, this isn't, again, so much of a great diving shot, but I like full body extension where there's like a single plane of the player coming up and making contact with the ball. And just, you know, the lines on her, the lighting is nice because it's showing off her physical definition, her muscles and everything else. And it's just, you know, it's just a kind of a fun shot. You got Rob in the background there on the mic.
My man Rob.
Yeah.
I
It's just,
I host him last week.
I know you did. Yeah. And I just, you know, so lighting is important because it shows off their muscularity and their definition and illuminates their face as well. So this was just kind of a shot. I kind of liked the angle of it. And this is more of a local player. He does AVP, but he's not one of the, you know, the more high profile players, but he does almost all the AVP tournaments. His name is Doc, is what they call him. Can't think of his real name. But he's a gritty player. Always some great backcourt shots out of him. And again, this is a rare one because he's fully horizontal and he's also touching the ball. That's a rare combination right there. And this is Sean Rosenberg, you know, Rosie, you know, just ageless wonder. You know, he's, I don't know how old he is now, but he can still make plays like this and he still goes for everything. And, you know, you can tell, you know, you're certain that his body is probably in pain the next day, but he leaves it all on the court. And he's been playing like that for his entire life. And he's just so fun to watch. And he's a great crowd pleaser too. Everybody loves Rosie and he's got his own fan base, you know, Rosie's Raiders. And they do a good job of getting the crowd going. And what I like about this is just, you know, composition. You know, we talked about arenas that I like shooting in. Pauley Pavilion has so much tradition in it that it was fun to shoot in there. And I in post-production, I lit up all of their banners they have hanging from their ceiling. Well, those that are in the frame, obviously. So not only does this show the verticality of Kofi on his jump serves, but it also just kind of shows the athletic history that you have playing in Pauley Pavilion and what a special place that is for those athletes to be playing in, where all the greats in volleyball and basketball have played for centuries and decades, you know. So it's an honor to shoot in a facility that has such a storied history and to be able to light up their banners and see those in a shot and you know, catch the action like this. And there's a pancake. So that's a really tough shot to get from a low angle without having 800 players in the way. This is one of the McKibben brothers, their youngest brother, who's now playing at USC. And, you know, I got him right in as point of contact on his pancake dig, greatly executed. And with, you know, not much in the way of interference of players between he and I. So that's a rare photo from the sidelines. It's more likely to get from the rafters when you're shooting down on a player than it is from the sidelines like this. And that's just another Rosie with his back flipper. You know, he's got 1,000,001 shots. And if you saw him in that tournament, I think 2 years ago, where he was going for a dig and at the last second, his teammate partially blocked the ball and he did a blind spin around backwards and hit a back flipper like this. without ever seeing the ball. He just had an instinct of where the ball might be. And he did a 360 spin with his back to the ball and made contact almost identical to this. And the ball went over and landed in, and they scored a point, and the crowd went absolutely ballistic.
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
Right. That was the last, Jim.
That was it.
Very,
Good.
very amazing pictures.
My phone's running out of battery here.
All right. So, pretty amazing job, Jim. I insist you're an artist. You're an artist of photography, and especially in the sport I love, that is volleyball. And I really, really appreciate your job, your time
I
here.
appreciate you having me. Yeah.
Alma Garcia, a very good friend of mine here in Mexico, says Maria Clara Salgado is from Brazil.
Oh, Brazil. That's right. She is fun. She's a great player, great personality, and she's fun to shoot. You know, a lot of it is I like shooting players that are fun to shoot. So you have, you know, earlier question was who's my favorite to shoot. It's whoever brings the most fun to the court. You know, so players like Rosie and Rosie's Raiders, you know, that heckle of competing players that he's playing against. You know, it's fun to see that engagement and that interaction of players and fans like that.
Okay, well, Jim, I don't know if you have anything more to say. Please send a final message for your followers here in Mexico.
No, just welcome everybody to join me on Facebook and Instagram. You've got my Instagram link there as well. So look forward to staying in touch with you guys and showcasing my work going forward here, and you know, just sharing the great sport of volleyball with everyone.
Yes, for sure. And I hope to see you pretty soon. Maybe hope if you can be in Cancun for November, could be great. Or California, I think next year. This year is pretty
Up in
difficult.
the air. Yeah.
For Manhattan Open, I want to be in the Manhattan Open. Is the cathedral of beach volleyball.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think beach will come back quicker than indoor, but I hope they're both back sooner versus later, because we're all missing them greatly. So.
Yes, well, I had an invitation this year from Stephanie Ray Hossack, the wife of Jay Hossack, to be in Virginia this year for Final Four in George Mason, but unfortunately it wasn't possible. But right. I want to thank you, Jim, for your time, for sharing all your experiences, your pictures. Thanks a lot. Stay healthy. Sorry, and I hope to see you pretty soon.
Likewise, and thanks for all the fans that that logged in and shared this webcast with us. And I look forward to sharing my work with all of you going forward here.
Okay.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.
See you. Bye bye, Jim.